Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Come, family. Sit in the snow with Daddy and let us all bask in television's warm, glowing, warming glow.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Wake Up Heavy, Recollections of Horror. This is Mark Begley, your host, and today I'm going solo and getting back to the TV memories from my youth. And instead of talking about movies that I saw, this time I want to talk about actual TV shows that I watched when I was younger, leaning into the horror or kinder trauma aspect of some of those shows. And when I was growing up, there was a good 20-25 years worth of TV to catch up on, including new shows and then going all the way back to the golden age of television from the 50s. I Love Lucy was a mainstay. That was in syndication, Honeymooners, all kinds of stuff like that. And then more recent shows from the 60s, Batman and Star Trek were also already in syndication. Brady Bunch was already in syndication. And so I watched all that stuff. I watched Saturday morning cartoons, obviously. Then there were some newer things to catch, and this is mainly what I'll be talking about on this one. And a couple of made-for-TV movies as well. So to start things off, one of my earliest TV memories and one of my earliest horror experiences came from an unlikely source. And I'm pretty sure I saw this in its original airing. If that's true, I was about 7 years old, but still a little older than 7.5, and it scared the living crap out of me. Formed such a solid memory in my head that I recall this scene pretty accurately all the way up until my late 40s when I finally saw it again. And that surprising show was Little House on the Prairie. Which we watched weekly growing up. And my mom used to read those books to us before we would go to school in the morning. Little House was big in our house, and they would do Halloween episodes. This one that I'm thinking of that struck such a chord with me was from season 3. It's episode 5, and it premiered on November 1st, 1976. Just missed Halloween by a day, but people were still in the mood. And it was called The Monster of Walnut Grove. The Ingalls children were out pulling pranks, soaping windows and things like that, like they did back in the old days. And they see something through a window. This was and of course I'm forgetting their names now, the shopkeeper who had the horrible children and the horrible wife, and he was kind of a nice guy. Anyway, he sets up this deal where he chops off his wife's head with a sword. Melissa Sue Gilbert sees this, and as a 7-year-old seeing this, and not really understanding special effects and things like that, it just absolutely horrified me. It turns out that the mom, the mean lady, and I can't remember their names for the life of me, darn it, I should have pulled that up. She was out of town, and he was playing this prank on them. And there's another scene later on where I think her head, the dummy head, goes rolling down the basement steps or the cellar steps. That was also pretty horrifying. So that's one of my clearest kinder trauma memories. I see this come up a lot on Twitter. People ask, what's your first horror movie, or what's your first? And I barely remember anything. I always go back to that Magic commercial that horrified me when I was a kid. And this is really one of the only other things that I remember from such a young age that just, it's that unknown. Like, I didn't get that this was a special effect, really. I didn't get why this was happening on this normally really sweet show. And I just kind of sat there stunned watching this and didn't ask for an explanation or get an explanation as to what was going on. It's revealed that it's fake in the show, but it just really kind of fractured my mind for a moment there. And there were a few other Halloween episodes on that show, and I've seen people write about those, and I need to go back and catch them. I think a lot of the episodes are on Amazon Prime and some other streaming services. They play on cable as well, and we've watched some with my daughter. It was a great show. I mean, it's really fantastic still to this day. Something else that I watched when I was younger, and I just tried to track some of the episodes down and got some from a buddy of mine, the Nancy Drew Hardy Boy Mysteries. With, I think it was Pamela Martin, or Pamela Sue Martin as Nancy Drew, and then the Hardy Boys was Parker Stevenson and Sean Cassidy. And there was always something a little bit creepy going on with these. It was a little bit Scooby-Doo-ish, where there really wasn't anything supernatural happening, but they'd kind of lean into that and then discover what the mystery was. I never read these books. I was more of a Three Investigators kid when I was growing up. But the show I really, really enjoyed, and I liked that dipping the toe into horror and mystery, and again was often befuddled by what was happening until the end and everything was revealed. I want to get the kid to watch some of those episodes, and hey, maybe that's something we can talk about in the future. Just hearing that theme song brought back a ton of memories. I had completely forgotten about that. And it is pretty awesome. Another show that I watched almost strictly for the horror elements, oddly enough, was Fantasy Island. And there were usually 3 stories in each episode. And most often there was at least one that had a mystery or supernatural or horror element to it. And I remember really not caring about the other stories and always hoping there was at least one kind of spooky one. And a lot of times the other ones were about love or about wealth or getting all these wishes granted to you. But often enough, a spooky twist or kind of a monkey's paw scenario where none of the wishes really work out and they find out they're better off the way they were, blah, blah, blah. But it was those spooky angles that attracted me. And then one of the other big shows from my youth was one of the first big Marvel dives into TV and or movies, and that was, of course, The Incredible Hulk.
Dr. David Banner, physician, scientist, searching for a way to tap into the hidden strengths that all humans have. Then an accidental overdose of gamma radiation alters his body chemistry. And now when David Banner grows angry or outraged, a startling metamorphosis occurs.
And the funny thing about these three shows, Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Fantasy Island, and The Incredible Hulk, is they all premiered in 1977, so I was all of 8 years old at this time. The Incredible Hulk wasn't really scary in any way. I think I was a little freaked out by him just being big and green and giant, but I remember getting I believe it was, what were those old kid magazines, entertainment magazines? I can see the fonts in my head and I can't recall any of the titles. I would often look at them at the library or at school, and there was an article or an interview with Lou Ferrigno, and I learned all about him, his deafness, and the stuff that happened to him when he was grown up, so it kind of humanized the show. But again, there were spooky elements or mystery elements that kind of hit that other or unknown for me in that show. And the transformation scenes could be a little bit horrifying at times, and I know that Ferrigno himself didn't want the Hulk to appear as horrific or horrible to audiences, but still, when you see the shirt splitting and the pants splitting and the eyes changing, and that can hit an 8-year-old in a different way maybe than he was hoping. So these were all new shows that we watched on a regular basis. Little House, the other three I mentioned. But there were also syndicated shows, and of course Twilight Zone would have been right up there. I remember seeing Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes, not maybe as often as Twilight Zone, things like The Outer Limits. Probably caught some of those British horror shows, anthologies / movies, like I mentioned on the previous TV episode, and I'm still trying to figure out what that one was that I saw. Could have been Thriller, could have been Hammer House of Horror. I just found another show called Beasts that was written by Nigel Neal. It was shot on what looks like videotape, so I'm investigating that as well. I watched one episode. It wasn't the one that I remembered, but it was pretty cool, called Baby. It's on YouTube. Check it out. In the vein of The Twilight Zone, we had Rod Serling's next anthology series, and that was Night Gallery. And this leaned more into horror than Twilight Zone did. And I have very clear memories of catching what I have discovered was the pilot episode. I think it, again, one of those things that just sat with me for years, and I always remembered that Roddy McDowall was in it. And I knew who Roddy McDowall was because of Planet of the Apes. I discovered, I don't know how many years ago now, that it was on Hulu. And so I watched it and I found this episode. And like so many of the shows back then, it was originally an hour long and there were 3 segments, kind of like Fantasy Island or The Love Boat. And when it went into syndication, they chopped everything up, split those segments into their own episodes to fill out 30 minutes. I think that's what was on Hulu. And probably how I watched them in syndication as 3 separate episodes, but I remember each segment from this pilot, especially the first one with Roddy McDowall, and all of the stories involve paintings. And in this one, he kills off his father or uncle, rich father or uncle, to get his money. Ossie Davis was this man's butler. I don't remember all the details clearly, but what I remember is the painting was a painting of this house and property, and the old man that Roddy McDowall killed off is buried on the property. Each time he looks at the painting, something changes a little bit with this burial plot. He looks at it one time and the headstone's turned over. He looks at it another time and the grave is dug up. He looks at it again and there's a figure coming out of the grave, and so on and so forth until there's a knock or a rattling at the door and the dead uncle or dad is back to enact his revenge. And I just thought that was the coolest thing and the greatest idea. Nice and spooky, and a nice monkey's paw twist where the bad guy gets his comeuppance at the end. And then the other story in that, or the other two stories, one was with Joan Crawford, and she's this rich old blind lady, and she gets new eyes, goes through nefarious means to get these eyes, and she's only going to be able to see for a half a day. So when she takes off her bandages, everything's black. There's a blackout in the city that she's living in. So you get what you wish for, but it always doesn't work out. And then the last one I think had to do with a Nazi on the run, and he discovers that he can hide inside of paintings. So every time he's just about to get caught, he jumps into a painting. And the final one he jumps into, I think, if memory serves, is a depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus. So he gets his comeuppance at the end. Great show, though. I think it is still streaming somewhere, but the episodes are all hacked up, and then they also combined it with a show called The Sixth Sense, wrapped those up as Night Gallery episodes as well. And those are pretty interesting, too. They star Gary Collins, who many kids from the 70s will recognize. And then the other big show that I caught in syndication that I really, really loved was Dark Shadows. And this was usually on, I think, every day after school, so about 3 or so. I don't remember much about it other than, of course, Barnabas Collins. There's hundreds of those episodes, and those are all available streaming somewhere, Prime or Hulu or something like that. And I tried to start watching them again a few years ago. One thing I didn't notice about the show when I was a kid was that these were done, I mean, it's basically a soap opera. And so they were filmed on video, and they were filmed quickly. And there are a lot of mistakes by the actors in this show. I tried to watch it, and I think the first, I don't know how many seasons are without Barnabas Collins. I have to admit that I got kind of bored, and I gave up on it. And also, again, overwhelming with just how many episodes there are. But I need to dive in again when Barnabas shows up, and I liked all the spooky touches, the gothicness of it, the monsters in kind of a more modern day setting. Now, I mentioned made-for-TV movies, and there were a lot of horror-tinged TV movies made during the 70s and 80s. I just don't remember catching all that many of them, and I don't know if that was... I don't think my parents had any real objection to most of what we watched. I think they figured since it was on network TV, it couldn't be too bad. So there wasn't a lot of monitoring of stuff like that. I just don't... I've seen more now, I think, as an adult than I ever did as a kid, and there are some really great ones out there. But I do remember a couple in particular. The miniseries based on Tom Tryon's Harvest Home. I watched it last year or something. But that's sort of along the lines of a Children of the Corn cult folk tale movie with Bette Davis. I eventually read the book and enjoyed the book. The other thing that I saw from Tryon on TV, although it wasn't a TV movie, is The Other. And this is one of those ones I should have brought up on that first episode about TV watching, because that one really creeped me out. I have since watched it a couple of times. It's mildly creepy, but there was just something, again, about that unknown, being too young for some of the stuff that was going on and not understanding everything, that gave it more of a creepy edge. And that is also the case for Dark Night of the Scarecrow, which is a film that stuck with me for years. That movie absolutely freaked me out when I saw it. I believe it came out in 1981, so I was 12 and starting to get more into horror, and that really put the whammy on me. I have seen it since. It's not nearly as scary, but it definitely still has that creepy vibe.
Tonight on the CBS Saturday Night Movies, this gentleman saved this little girl's life, but they accused him of harming her.
Do this ourselves.
And he was tragically murdered. Now, one by one, the men of this town are dying. Who is his avenger? Is it the dead man's grief-stricken mother?
They killed my boy!
The little girl who loved him?
I know what you did to Baba.
Or could it be the Scarecrow? Dark Night of the Scarecrow, coming up next.
Part of what I liked, or what dug in for me as a kid, was that I didn't understand, is this supernatural? Is this not supernatural? Is this young guy that was murdered by all these people, is he the Scarecrow? Or is it someone else enacting revenge on his behalf? And it I feel like maybe they didn't know either and decided at the end to make it supernatural. It's actually had a resurgence in popularity. I think it's been put out on Blu-ray or DVD recently, and I know that I've been able to catch it more readily on streaming services, so check that one out. Alright, so that does it for Kinder Trauma TV Adventures. I have switched back to my old recording setup because I still noticed some high-end clicks on the latest episode with Cleo on my end. It has something to do with the whole mixing and process and everything. It's bumping it up too loud, and I'm topping out on volume. I hope that this rectifies that, and if not, then I'll know for sure that it has to do with the post-production of these. But I'm on my old blue snowball, laying on the ground. It is what it is. I think I'll pass on movie watching this time. Most of it has been monster movies and kung fu movies, all of which I have discussed on recent episodes. I've watched a few newer films on Shudder, and none of them were all that much to my liking, so I think I'll just skip over those for now. And next up for the show, other than the Monster Battle series with my daughter, is an episode on Looking for Mr. Goodbar with Mike White and Sam Deegan as guest hosts. Alright, thanks so much for joining me once again. Hopefully this sounds better. If not, I will keep working on it, and I apologize if it doesn't. Have a great day, and don't forget,
anything can happen when you wake up heavy. Ho, 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 ho.